Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our talk today, historical and social context of gender imbalances in jazz, here on the Saturday of the Jazzahead 2022. My name is Laura Block. I'm the project manager for the gender equality issues at the Deutsche Jazzunion, the German jazz union, which is representing the interests of jazz musicians in Germany. And we have many projects going on concerning issues of gender diversity, gender equality. And actually today's session is part of our Inside Out Digitale Akademie. So just for those of you who speak German, there's a lot of stuff going on through May and June, workshops, etc. Everything is online, but it's all in German, unfortunately. So if you're interested in these issues, just pick up a flyer and tune in. But today I'm going to be speaking with Monika Herzig. Is going to tell us about her book and about some research she's been doing into the issues of jazz and gender. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A, so all of you will have the opportunity to get into discussion with us, get into discussion with amongst yourselves to talk about gender equality, gender issues within jazz. So that's what we're doing today. We have not so much time, just 45 minutes, so we're going to rush a little bit through everything, but that's the way it is at places like this. But I'm glad so many of you came, and I'm looking forward to the short but powerful discussion we'll be having today. So I'm going to hand over to Monika now. She's going to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what we're going to be hearing about today. Monika.
Absolutely. So I have the book picture here. Just FYI, there is discount flyers on that table back there. So grab one to take it along. And it also has the table of contents. So take some of those. There's a few flyers left to have. It's coming out in July. I am a jazz pianist, and I've been around the block for quite a while. I left Germany in '88 and have been living in the States for 30-something years. And also created a career. I have a group, an all-female group called Shiros. We'll be on tour over the next 2 weeks around the area. And so this book came about with another colleague, two colleagues, one from Western Oregon University, one from Vienna, to edit, and it's 40 plus chapters, and it was really eye-opening to see this is not just something we keep talking about. There's some ground, some scientific ground to what these issues are about. So before we get started, because presentations are always so boring, I want to do something, and you have like neighbors. I know we can only hear through the headphones, but you can talk to each other. Exchange with each other. Just name 5 female vocalists. Let's see how fast you can do it. Talk to each other and name 5 female vocalists. I'll give you 5 seconds and we'll see how many were able to do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, who got to 5 female vocalists? Did you do it? Good job. All right, now talk to each other and name 5 female pianists.
I'm going to be, because some of you have not your headphones anymore. So now we're looking for female pianists playing the piano.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, how many figured out female pianists? 5. Did you do it again?
Okay, here are some music nerds over here.
Now name 5 female trombonists. Go. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, who got up to 5 female trombonists? Did you do it again?
Over there. 4, okay. They're pretty good. This is like, they're really good.
They got it. Last one, 5 female drummers. Can you name 5 female drummers? Carolyn Carrington is allowed. It's good. But there's a few more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who got up to 5 female drummers?
Oh.
All right, you guys rock.
Yeah, they're
See,
the best.
and that's exactly the evidence. You know, we see our younger generation, there is change and it's great, and we see that. You guys won a pencil. Pick it up later. But so, meaning the main thing we're talking about, and I don't know if my tech people are listening, but turn off real quick the projector, and I'm going to play you possibly, just a short piece of music. And if you have something to write or draw, just draw a stick man people picture of how you think that band looks like that's playing, okay? I'll just play for a few minutes. Let's see if it works.
Otherwise, do it in your
works.
head.
Okay, so draw a picture. How does that band look like that you're hearing? People are good. So I'm going to reveal how the band looks like in a minute. So you can look at your picture. I'm not even going to ask what you have. But just for... So can we have the slides back on the screen? So for your own fun, this is how the band looks like. Did you draw anything like this one? We actually have, I think, 1 or 2 band members here, right? You can raise your... But meaning, my bet is, and I'm not going to ask, that your picture probably looked a little bit different, which is also the other thing. It's the perception issue. So finishing out my introduction, this is who I am, this is what we're up to. And Laura, you can ask me some more.
Yes. Thank you very much for this vivid introduction. So we just heard you edited and published together with your 2 colleagues the Routledge Companion to Jazz and Gender, comprising over Routledge comprising over 40 chapters with completely different perspectives and zooming in on different issues. Tell us a bit more about the book. What motivated you guys to pursue this project? Why do you think it was necessary to edit this book?
So now let's get into the nitty-gritty. So, looking at the history of women in jazz, one thing is that this is not a new topic. Going back in the 30s, 40s, there's always been plenty of women around. We've been talking about this and since 60 years, and there's a reason why we're still talking about it. So the goal is that we don't have to talk about it anymore, that, we get to this point. So if you look at the history, especially during Second World War, there were these amazing female big bands, probably the most prominent one, the International Sweethearts of Rhythm, that toured the USO bases at the time. And reason being there was a shortage of mans because they were in war, and suddenly there was an opportunity. But one of the members here, Ross Cohn, was great saxophone player, and Sherry Tucker, to be recommended if you're looking for literature. She wrote some of the most eminent books on the topic early on. And what she clearly said, that it was her only way to do this, to join the Sweethearts of Rhythm. There was no other opportunity. So a lot of these early groups evolved because of missing opportunities. And this actually group came out of an orphanage in Mississippi where they cultivated bands playing together, and they put the girls on the road, and the girls decided to not return and form keep going, and it was a big discrepancy, and the teacher got fired, of course, but they kept touring, and for a lot of them this was the only opportunity to do this, to create a living as musicians. Of course, there's a great documentary called Lady Be Good by Katie Ray that documents all these bands from that era, and she talked to many of them, and of course the moment the war was over, lots of them returned back. You know, even earlier on, to document the roots, I don't know if you know the story of Billy Tipton, but Billy was Dorothy Tipton, and early on realized that he got way more jobs dressing up as a male and started doing that, and eventually just stopped dressing back and became Billy Tipton. So, you know, even looking later, 50 years, so here's some of the landmarks. This is really small, so I'll help you look at. But 1977 was when Marion McParland formed the first all-female group. She went to George Wein from the Newport Jazz Festival, and he said, you know, that's not going to be possible. You can't do that. But she did. And in other things, 81 was the first female judge on the Supreme Court. 82 was the first woman in the Berlin Philharmonic, and 2012, only 6% in the Vienna Philharmonic were female performers. The first position in 97, 83, first woman in space. 87, Aretha Franklin, first member of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. 96, the first Emmy for original score, movie score. 98, first woman to win a Tony Award. Marian Alsop, 2008, the first principal conductor of an orchestra, that's 2008. Tara Lynn Carrington wins the first instrumental Grammy in 2014. And 2016, I'm going to a jam session at Jazzland and showing him my CD in Vienna, and he goes, well, that wouldn't work in Austria. You just can't find any capable women to do that. Not possible. So, and then even 2018, going from your study, there's only 12% of female instrumentalists in Germany total, and one full-time faculty member at that time. So a lot of roots at the problem. This was a prominent controversy in the States when one of the country programmers exclaimed or explained how they program for their radio stations, that if you want to make ratings, he said, you need to treat it like salad. So the man is the lettuce, because their clientele, he said, listeners in country music would be much more female, so they want to hear the males, so they program by purpose the lettuce, and then the females, they sprinkled it in like the tomatoes. So it's not made up. There's actually a method behind that in terms of media on how you handle it. So before I go to the roots, Laura.
You didn't only edit the book, the companion that we just spoke about, but you also wrote one chapter, which of course is the chapter you know most about. And in the chapter you write about all-female groups, like your own band Sheroes, but of course there are other all-female groups. So tell us, what did you find out? What's your take on all-female bands? Is it an important tool for female empowerment, or is it just an easy way to get some gigs?
So yeah, I mean, it's often accused you put an all-female group together and it's a gimmick, right? It's cool, and but there's actually reason. And we just had a great discussion over at the Canadian stand, and Rachel Theron also, who started a female group, and we have, of course, an influx right now, which is great, saying that actually when I play with them, I can finally just play my music and not worry about anything else, and the camaraderie. And she said, I finally know how it feels like to just play with your own peers. And I thought that was a pretty profound statement when she said that of that camaraderie. So I've been leading since 2014 this group, and I guess I'm proud to say that hopefully many of the ones copied my idea, but that's great, and I love to see that. But here are some of the root problems that need to be addressed, and this is the issues why this is important, and it's not just a gimmick, it's not just made up. So one issue to realize is that there was this post-feminism movement in the 90s. And what it was this movement after, we had the feminism and it was towards liberation that said, okay, you just have to be good enough to rise to the top. And the issue with that being that you end up with a very competitive environment, which it makes it just the opposite of feminism intention, meaning now you're pitting the best against them, saying, okay, you just have to be good enough, so you just have to be better than your peer to make it through. And that competitiveness is not healthy, and that's not how especially women work. We're communal oriented. And if you look even at interviews in the 90s with Terlyn Carrington and Ingrid and Jensen and many more, they were like, we don't want to talk about this topic, we just want to talk about us as musicians, which is of course good, but then you also always have the exceptions. Everything is an exception that make it through, and that's not the purpose. It's about having an equal space at the table and having those opportunities. So the post-feminism, this alpha girl issue was one. And the other issue, this is a great book, Whistling Vivaldi. Take it and figure it out sometime, read it. But what he talks about is this stereotyping issue, meaning, just like I made you draw pictures of what you were hearing, there are certain perceptions that are ingrained with us from society. And if we like it or not, we still have certain perceptions of how a band should look like that goes on stage. We don't immediately think about, oh, all girls, woohoo, nothing special about it, that's going to be cool. But it's like, let's see. and I bet you'll catch yourself doing that because we're not used to it. So what happens is in the stereotyping is that you have this pressure on performing against what you think people perceive about you. And they did it with mathematics scores, just putting girls in environments and giving them a math test. And one saying, yeah, this is just to see where you are. And the other saying, no, we need the scores to place you. And suddenly the girls that had the pressure of needing to perform on this math test scored way lower because they thinking the expectations, nobody thinks girls do math well. And so there's different experiments like that just show once you put that pressure on needing to perform because you're perceived of not being able to do that, you will not perform the way you could naturally, but either pushing too hard or too low. So the stereotype threat is an issue, and that's what Rachel was referring to. And then finally, also the idea of tokenism. So, and we talked about that earlier too, that by now, where we are aware of, okay, let's have a more diverse look on stage. So often, since we have several all-female groups, other mixed groups, then you run into the issue at promoters saying, well, we got Artemis already playing, we're covered, we don't need any more, we did our thing. So we got one we're good, which is not the purpose either. So pushing that over the edge. No, not tokenism, not, oh yeah, we got the one special one and the rest go on as normal. 50-50, but not just in one leading other bands is the goal. So that there's a word for it with that tokenism. And here's a great story. Everybody knows Diva and Cherry Miracle, who leads Diva since 25 years. So one of the most lasting all-female groups. And she went through a lot of trouble to keep it together. But she told me this story. She said early on she wanted nothing more than playing with the Woody Herman band. So she sent in a tape for an audition. She didn't get the job, but later on, one of the band members told her that, yes, they remembered getting the tape, but he also remembered them all just laughing about it and throwing the tape in the trash can. So that's very discouraging and very sad stories, but unfortunately not uncommon. So one of my friends, Natalie Boink, who also did a chapter in the book, she is a pedagogue and she recently wrote her dissertation on what is the problem, why so many drop out. In middle school, we see half and half usually. And in the States especially, you do have jazz bands as part of the school curriculum, so it's very common. But half and half by high school, third, and then you get to college, and then it's the maybe 10% something. So she wanted to do a follow-up study and send out a survey, and she teaches now in North Carolina. And some of the things that came back were also very revealing. So this is, very recent. She sent that out in 2019, where, yes, of course, she got the positive responses from the female band director saying, yeah, we need this. I see the problem, and as a flute player, we need to change. But the revealing part was some other comments that were put on that survey saying, in my opinion, this is a manufactured problem, and you should stop talking about it. We give equal opportunities, and this is silly, and, we don't tailor anything for gender. So still not seeing that the way it's taught there is an issue. And the important things that she found out why the dropout rate is, and this is something to charge everyone involved, is the way jazz is introduced and taught often early on. Meaning, most of the time when you learn your instrument, you're early teenagers, and when you get into jazz, it's also early teenagers. And this is when the girls are in puberty. And it's very hard for girls in puberty to step out of their peer comfort zone and step forward and do something like improvising when you don't feel it could be perfect, or, somebody could laugh about it, or, you don't do that. But that inhibition. So usually the girls freeze when it goes to who wants to take a solo? And the boys go, hey, because they can show off and be the cool guys. And this is where the great divide starts, because, you learn by doing things more often, you get better at it. So if you start freezing and not participating, of course, after 2 years, you say, oh, I'm not as good as this, and this is not for me, and I don't have any role models. I'll just do something else and go on. And there's ways to work against that in making curriculas that help change that. And we do see change. We have the Key Changes initiative, and, you look at the numbers and it's looking good. The only thing I want to point out is something to think about that I talked with some of them. If you look at the 2019 numbers, it looks great because we have female-led bands at a very large structure. But every time you look closer, it's still most of the groups that have a female leader with the boys. So I still want to get to the ground of that, why there's often this hesitancy. So overall, if you just would count up numbers, it's in terms of performers, this looks better than it actually is. And, even at the Grammys over the years, it's not just in jazz, you look at most other categories, especially producers, then you can see where there's still issues. So why all female groups? This is from a recent Jazz Girls Day that I did with the group. It's incredible to see when you have these moments where there's no inhibition, no stereotyping, no tokenism, just let's make music together, that the music happens. It's good for the music. It'll create great music. It'll include all the voices beyond the 2% of that fight hard enough and that adjust and are really good. It's for the sake of democracy, the safe space to express, and just getting over some of these deep-rooted barriers that we have. And the last thing before we get into the further discussion is to think about, one of my friends said that, and I thought it was so profound, equality does not mean sameness. And then so something that over the years, was always the thing, you just act like the man and you just play hard enough like them, then you have your place. That's not the purpose and that's not the idea. It means bringing your own voice to the table the way it is. So it's not about sameness. It's overcoming and advocating and thinking about some of this rhetoric. And I think you're bringing that up in your jazz studie.
Yeah, so some of you, thank you for all of this interesting insights, and I think we'll get to the Q&A in a moment. I just want to tell you a bit of what the Jazzunion is doing. As you might or might not know, in 2018, so 4 years ago, we started seriously tackling this issue, and we published a declaration concerning gender equality in the jazz scene, and many individuals and also institutions signed this declaration. For instance, Jazzahead, I checked this morning, they were one of the first institutions to also sign this declaration, and there we have a lot of action items, ideas what we could do to make the jazz scene more equal for all genders. Things like parity on decision-making boards, on juries, that we want to see 50-50 female-male in, and that there is a lot going on in that direction, but also, of course, gender equal language. This is maybe not so relevant when you're speaking English, but in German, it's important if you're always only talking of Musiker, then you just think of the men, but that we also have to include the Musikerinnen normally in there. But of course also education, as you just pointed out, is so important. We have to go much more into that early education and try to keep the girls there and try to figure out ways in which we can foster that. So we did this study, and I just wanted to very briefly mention this because it's important. If we want to change things, we first have to know what's going on. So this was the Jazz Studie 2016. So all of you who are living and working in Germany, regardless if you're German or not, but if you have your main point of working as a jazz musician in Germany, there's a new jazz study that we're doing at the moment, 2022, and this time, but now we have the whole survey in English too. So if you're an international musician living in Germany, please take the study. We want to have as many of you included so we really know what's going on. And also we improved the questions a lot. It's a lot about how you earn your money, how many gigs you play. So it's a lot also about your economical situation, because we need to know this stuff in order to be able to make some changes also on the political level. But we also included a lot of issues on gender, on discrimination, on diversity, etc., just to reflect that also. So I really invite all of you. That's the QR code. It's still running to it takes a little time. I mean, you're not going to do it in 10 minutes, maybe an hour or 1.5 hours, but you should get through it. But please help us know what's going on. So a big invitation so we have new numbers and we can really figure out what we're dealing with. But so in the last study, we found out the numbers 80% of jazz musicians in Germany are men, 20% are women. And if you zoom in on the instruments, this will probably not surprise you, about half of those women are singers. And only the other half are spread over all the other instruments. And then there are even some instruments that basically there are quite a few saxophone players, female, there are some pianists. Yes, but then when you look, it gets fewer and fewer and fewer. And then you have like, whatever, two female drummers in Germany. And of course we want to change that. We want to really invite, and this happens very early on when you choose your instrument, that a teacher tells you, a drum, I don't know, for it's so loud. How about a violin for your small hands or something like that? This happens to girls all the time. You can speak to so many. And then maybe in the end they just decide, I know a lot of female singers. I'll just become a singer as well myself. I have a lot of... So we really need role models. We really need to change this. And role models are so important. Like... you really see it that when there's an outstanding female bass player that really gets famous, then suddenly we see a surge in other girls that say, oh, that's so cool, I want to play. It doesn't matter that it's big and I'm small, I can still play the bass. So we really need to have that. And then just concerning also taking a look at the men, because it's important to remember the men in all of this discussion as well. We had a question where we asked musicians, did you ever feel in your musical career that you had an advantage or disadvantage because of your gender at any time? And it won't surprise you probably that the women, the female musicians, 63%, so basically 2/3, said, yes, I have the feeling I have had disadvantages in my musical career because I'm a woman. And also 45% of them said, but there were also moments where I had maybe an advantage, where I had the feeling, maybe I did get that gig because I'm a woman or something like that. So gender is always an issue for women. They have the feeling this influences the way people perceive me, this influences the way I move, because I'm always perceived maybe as a kind of exception to the norm. And the men, on the other hand, that answered the survey, they basically said no to both questions. Over 60% said, I never had any advantages, and I never had any disadvantages. So they, in a way, being a male musician also feels to the male musicians as just being normal, my gender isn't important. My gender doesn't play any role. And of course, as a feminist, I'm here to tell you, actually, you have quite a few privileges because of your gender. And maybe you don't realize it. And probably you walk through the world and you just think, I'm gender blind. Gender doesn't matter to you. But if we look at both sides, then we see, well, actually, there must be something going on there. So this is just important to always remember, also for all of you guys, that actually your gender does probably play a role quite a few times, and you don't even realize it. But just to tell you a bit about the stuff that we found out, and we're excited to find out more stuff. So heartily invitation from the Jazz Union to take the study. And now we have a couple of minutes left. If any of you guys have a comment, have a discussion topic, want to address any of the issues that Monika raised, or want to tell us a bit about your experiences with this topic, there are two microphones, one over there and one over there, and you would have to just walk up to the microphone, or we can bring it over.
Be brave.
Be brave. The first.
There was a lot of good points that were raised earlier at the Canadian one, and the feedback is really important in the discussion. So go for it.
Okay, I'm on the other side. I'm programmer at a venue.
Go a little bit closer to the microphone so we can hear you.
What do I need?
Yes,
close.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm on the other side. I'm a programmer at the venue, and when I look at my audience in jazz events, I see also most male audience. Do you touch that point also in the book or in your studies?
Looking at it and what the country programmer said, is works for you, right? So that it's kind of a catch-22 effect, that we cultivated an audience because of the way the jazz looks like that's mostly male. So of course you would be afraid, if you program differently. And I can attest to that when we tour with the group, our audience looks very different. And most of the hardcore jazzers will actually not come. And probably, maybe not intention, but again, this perception of, yeah, this is probably something cute, but, it's not my jazz. So, yes, and meaning, this is a communal process again, too. So little by little, that perception will also change the audience. And I think that's part of the democratic process, too, of letting everybody into this art form, because then by unfortunately, we conditioned an audience to be of a certain type, too. And I think there would be a change in that. You can't go radically and say, okay, I'm a promoter, now I'm going to make a whole season of all females, because then you lose your money and it doesn't work. But it can be gradually, and once that perception communally, you see new audiences come in, and it'll help you too in that way.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
Hello.
Hi.
I was just wondering, and you touched on it in the study, do you, in the book, or also include intersectional factors as well? Because obviously looking through the lens of gender, but then how that interacts with other possibilities of advantages, disadvantages. Just wanted to ask about that. Thanks.
One thing to realize, actually, with the book, it's called Jazz and Gender and not Women in Jazz. So there's quite a few chapters in there that also look at the LGBTQ community, at from all aspects of gender. So yes, we do look at it, and there's the case study of Jennifer Leatham, who started out as a male bass player and in front of audiences transitioned to being a female. And in her case study, she talks quite a bit how the types of jobs changed and the way she was perceived from, playing with the great big bands and having to go through that. So, yes, we do touch on it. I'm not sure I can go all the details, but it is discussed. And thank you for pointing out, that gender is not binary too. That's the thing to realize. You look at Indian traditions, and I think there's more than 60, the American Indian traditions, there's more than 60 different definitions of gender. And that's something, obviously, we have to work with and realize in our day and age, too, to deal with that. I actually have a transgender kid, so I had to go through the whole process too, okay, and be supportive.
Yeah, and within the Jazz Union, we've also basically expanded, because as soon as we started talking about gender equality and equality more in general, equal opportunities, justice, etc., we realized, we can't really stop with gender. I mean, it's important, and it's also not finished by far yet. We still have a long way to go to achieve gender equality. But of course, we want to also include other forms of discrimination, other types of advantages, disadvantages. So actually, we have a working group now it's not called gender. It started basically as a gender equality working group, and now it's transformed itself to a gender and diversity working group. And we also then lobbied hard for the new jazz study to talk about issues like racism, but also class-based discrimination. So that's also a big issue, actually. I think all over the world, that the people that actually end up being musicians and also the consumers are, of a certain social and economic and educational background, and that it would actually, and that if you find yourself coming from a different social background, you often also experience, a lot of difficulties to build your career and to connect with people. We really try to keep all those issues in focus. So we're really excited we don't know so much about that yet. I think we have like anecdotal evidence of also, of course, black musicians in Germany telling us anecdotally of their experience of the stuff they hear, of the kind of stereotypes that are attached to them as musicians, positive and negative. It goes somehow both ways, that just stuff gets attributed to you that you just would like to play your music and be considered as a musician. So we're excited to see what we can find out also with the new jazz study, and then from there, of course, develop new recommendations how to make the whole jazz scene a more inclusive place for everybody, not just for women, but of course also for women. So.
Hi, thank you. I'd be interested in hearing your stand on quotas and how it's as a concrete measure to, at least for publicly funded festivals or publicly funded venues, to at least have some sort of incentive to have more women. I don't know if 30, 40, 50%, ideally at some point 50%, of course, but to have some sort of a hard measure to like force in a way bookers and programmers to like think about it, and to like, if they don't reach that quota, that they get like less public money, something a bit more not recommendatives, but more tougher.
Monika, what's your stance on quotas?
You know, the World Economics Foundation, I think, did a study just a few years ago on equality overall in business, and what they said, of course it's changing. We will get to 50-50, I think it was 2080 was the prognosis, which means that's a very long time. And so meaning if we let it go naturally, it goes a long time, and none of you here will have that advantage. You're not going to live that long. You're even the younger ones than me. So meaning some intervention is important, and the role model aspect is important. What's a fair quota? That's a really hardcore thing to say. Is it 50-50? You know, I would say at least starting in the educational realm for universities, saying you cannot have an all-male faculty, meaning you have to at least one or two, going to tokenism either, again, where you say, we got one, now we're done. So, but meaning in the education realm is the first place to start. And one thing that I want to add, you know, it sounds really rough, and often people go, well, but that's not fair either, because there's only so many spaces in jazz. We already have more supply than demand anyway, which means the moment we put one in, somebody else needs to go out. So it's not a fair process, and it's a very competitive art form to do that. And that's really hard. You know, that's to consider. You don't want to cause other disadvantages, meaning we also have to look to the outside and say, how can we create more resources to have not this art form so marginalized that it gets so competitive that we have to fight so hard. Maybe overall we can increase the opportunities.
Yeah. Well, as a jazz union, speaking for the jazz union, we are not yet at the point to recommend hard quotas for on stage. Me personally, I think it would be a good measure, and it's a good idea that you could start with. You don't have to make it so. And you're not going to fine a festival if they don't have enough women, but you can say you're getting a lot of public funding, and it's also true, for instance, for just as you said, universities. We have the in Germany, we have the big bands of the öffentlich-rechtliche big bands. They're completely financed by the public. And there are so few women in there. I mean, there are 4 big bands. They have almost 20 members each. And I think in total we have like 2 or 3 women. How is that possible, you know? And please don't tell me there are no capable women, you know? And it's, and there, for instance, I know that a lot of the radio heads would actually like to have more women, but they have classically the process that all of the big band members themselves have to choose, they decide who gets to be the new member. And they don't want to mess with that, because it's of course also important for the way the band works. They have, a big band is a complex thing, they have to work together. And if the guys don't want to let the girl in, what are you going to do, kind of, you know? And it's like, it's tough. And also, of course, if you speak to female musicians, they're not going to say, okay, I want to be the one that got pushed down the throats of the other musicians. They all didn't want me to come, and then I was like forced in there. I'm not going to do that job either, you know? I don't want to be here. But yeah, I think it's tough. And we also have to start talking, and this process is going on, and I think there is a lot of progress when you talk about juries, when you talk about decision-making bodies that are already there. We've been seeing in the last even 5 years a lot of progress, you know, where you see you can't have a jury anymore, where they are really seriously 10 guys deciding who gets the prize or who gets the funding. We also have to look into funding committees, for instance, you know, because there's a little bit more hidden jury often, you know, it's not so public. The people that are deciding who gets public money, etc. So I think there we have to definitely push push definitely for 50-50 quota also. For
Blind
sure.
audition in classical music changed the whole landscape. You look at the 70s when the blind auditions were implemented, suddenly it changed from single digits to more than 30%. So there's a way without the quota of finding that. And I think the jury part is the other key to that puzzle.
So, but yeah, definitely. And we can also start thinking about, I was recently at a panel discussion and somebody said, why are we always talking about like the quota for women? Maybe we should also talk about a maximum quota for white cis males, you know, just like they're so dominant. Why can't we just say maybe there has to be like, just like when they get to, she actually said, 35%, you know, I think that's just enough. We have so many other people and they have been disadvantaged for such a long time. And of course, when you speak about quotas, the idea is always that this is just a permanent, not a permanent thing, but a kind of a bridge to get to a more inclusive place. So that maybe you'd have to do this for whatever, I don't know, for 5 years, for 10 years, for 20 years, not sure, you know, for a while. And then maybe at some point you can kind of fade it out and say, okay, we don't really need this anymore. Who knows? Maybe then we're going to have the quota for the white, heterosexual, poor males that are not getting gigs anymore. Who knows? But yeah, it was interesting to turn it around a little bit, you know, to say you are so privileged, you are so dominant, you are everywhere as a group. Maybe just, you know, maybe we have to limit your extent of domination in that way and kind of switch it around. And I thought that was a nice way to also think about it and speak about it.
So I know we are out of time and happy to chat and do some more, take the surveys.
Take the survey. And if you're German, I know all of the rest, the rest of the Digitale Akademie is in German, but we have so great events. We have stuff coming up on, some of it is professionalization, sustainability, but there's interesting talks on anti-discrimination, on anti-racism, etc. It's still going till June. It's free. You don't have to pay anything. It's financed by the Initiative Musik. So please sign up for our workshops. Jakob had so much work putting the programming together, and we're so happy to see many of you participating in these events. It's also a great way to network, to meet new other musicians that are interested in these topics, and together create a more inclusive jazz scene in Germany and all over the world. So I thank all of you so much for coming. Time is up.
The goal is in 10 years, we will not talk about this anymore.
Please.
In 10 years, we're done, right?
We'll be out of jobs, but that's fine. So thanks so much for coming. Have a nice rest of the jazz ahead. And yeah, speak to you soon. And we're still around if you want to come up for a chat. Thank you. And take the survey. Take the survey.